Hi, I'm Victor, the main organizer of the Full Stack Flutter conference. On this channel, we publish the best talks from the conference every week throughout the year, so make sure to subscribe so you don't miss out. I'm also the founder of Serverpod, so if you want to build your backend in Dart, make sure to check that out. In this very first video, we interview Craig and Kevin from the Flutter team at Google. Let's dive in. And I am very excited to welcome Craig and Kevin from the Flutter team. How are you guys doing?
We're doing great. Good morning.
Yeah, doing great. Excited
Good
to be
afternoon.
here.
Good evening, wherever people are. This is so fun to do these worldwide things.
I like to say good time of day.
Good time of day. So, can you tell me a little bit about what you guys are doing at the Flutter team? Just a quick intro.
Kev, you want to go first?
Sure. I'm a product manager, and I'm product management for the web stack of stuff. So that's on the Dart side of things. That's compilers. So that's our 2 JavaScript compilers, and now our WASM compiler, WebAssembly, which is super exciting. And then the Flutter web tooling and ecosystem. So if it has to do with the web, that's my role at Google, product management.
And yeah, I'm Craig Labenz. I'm on the developer relations team. So if you watch Flutter stuff on YouTube, you might have seen me darkening your doorway before today. I look forward to doing that again. Yeah, I try to explain how Flutter works to folks. First, I just have to figure that out for myself.
Yeah, and I should say that you can ask questions in the chat, and we'll try to pick them up here. And I'll just start it off with a few questions that we prepared. So the first one, I heard from someone on the internet that you guys got fired, or what is happening with the Flutter team?
Yes. Oh my gosh. Really what happened? There was a policy change and roles got shifted to new locations. And if people weren't willing to move a long way, they were let go. So we lost some people that, we loved greatly. Like they worked in engineering kind of support roles, like making sure the builds worked and everything else. And I think some of these roles are underappreciated, right? Because if you're not building the thing, but like supporting the thing is, we have a big machine that we run. So there were some, there was expressions of sadness and things that we lost people that we love working with, but really it was a policy change where some roles were shifted. Like there actually wasn't a reduction in headcount. We're hiring for those exact same roles in different places. So yeah, it was completely blown out of proportion. Greatly disappointed. I guess I want to turn this into a thank you, because the community folks have certainly been a great job of kind of re-amplifying. And obviously, if you look at our presence at I/O, like I love listening to the screaming and yelling. We had lots of people there from our team, and like it was obviously very loud. And I think we did 5 or 6 things at I/O. We're going to be in Germany for the that conference. Craig and I are here today. Like we're at the same power level. They shifted some roles and some people got let go because of shifted roles. But yeah, we're all here.
So where do you guys think that sort of sentiment comes from? I heard a theory it's like native developers afraid of getting kicked from their jobs unless they adapt. I don't know, but do you have any thoughts on that? Or
Craig, do you want to wax poetic on this? You leave something to me. I think it's the FUD stuff. So I think I know in some of the things I've seen online, and again, I try not to be a talking head, for tech. I work on Flutter, and I'm excited too. There are certainly a lot of people who are either very committed to, I guess we could say, competing or alternative things that like to, be the bearers of doom. I think any news around layoffs or things being killed, like it drives clicks. So I would say look at our official statements on this. My boss, Michael, tweeted out some information about what happened here. Like look at, Ian Hixie did a recent blog post about active contributions and posting. You can see how active we are at I/O, how active the commits are. Like nothing has changed here. So if you actually look at where the rubber hits the road in terms of our team's engagement, the source code we're pushing out, the updates we're pushing out, our engagement in events like this, and an IO Connect that's coming up this year. Like, nothing has changed.
All right. So I have a little bit of a related question, and that's like, how is Flutter governed? Is it Google that call all the shots, or what does that look like?
Well, there's a set of folks who have merge access, and that includes non-Googlers. So there's after you contribute to Flutter for a fair amount of time and kind of establish yourself as a high quality, trusted contributor, then you too can click the merge button, though there's still code reviews required. It's certainly true that,
And generally, we recommend auto submit label, let the robot merge it for you.
Right.
But, yeah.
Right. Yeah, just once you have the sufficient code reviews, then the click will or the merge will happen automatically. Yes. It's certainly true. I think that Google directs the efforts of the people that Google pays to work on Flutter full time. And I think that just somewhat obviously unavoidable dynamic leads to a perception of Google calling the shots, so to speak. But there's a pretty robust process for people to submit ideas, and some of the biggest some very big ideas over the years have come from folks outside Google. I remember even just some big, some small, like even the super dot whatever constructor idea came from a person on GitHub who was just like, this would be better, and they were right. So folks outside of Google shouldn't feel like they lack any ability to have impart their ideas or just have their impact on the project. But call the shots. Google directs the effort of the people that it pays. So
makes sense. So we got a question from the Brussels sprouts, and so what's the approach in future regarding Flutter versus Kotlin multi-platform? So are these supposed to exist in parallel, or are you like competitors, or how do you guys view this?
Definitely no competition. We're going to absolutely exist in parallel, and within Google, there's not really much in the way of a territory war or a turf war, so to speak. Kotlin, I can imagine very easily the scenario where I would use Kotlin multi-platform. If I really loved native UI composition, and I loved writing Swift UI, and I really loved building Android UIs, which those are just technologies that I personally have not yet put much time in, so this doesn't describe me. But if that's where my expertise lied, and so of course Java developers really love Kotlin. It's a great language. And I just wanted to stick with that set of technologies that I know very well. And Kotlin multi-platform is a perfect solution. So I don't think there's really much in the way there of conflict or attention between the two projects. I came to Flutter from the web. So from a JavaScript background, but with some kind of Swift and C# and whatnot, Dart just felt like the easiest thing for me in the universe to learn. And I knew React well. So understanding React components makes Flutter widgets pretty easy to understand. So Flutter for me was perfect. And obviously the health of this community suggests that Flutter is perfect for millions of developers around the world. But the same can be true for Kotlin multi-platform, and they're not identical. If you want to share your UI code, Kotlin multi-platform doesn't have a story for that. If you really, really, really love Kotlin, Flutter doesn't have a story for that. So I think they're going to continue to coexist. Kev, any other thoughts?
I love it when you answer these things. It's great. And Compose is more of a thing out of JetBrains. Like, Google's not doing much with the Compose work. So like, and I'm not exactly sure what, they have, I guess they had some cool demos. And I haven't dug in much. in terms of like what Compose offers. But just like we've lived parallel to, the Android dev stack for a long time, and the things with iOS, like we'll have a great interop story with all of it, I'm sure. And like that's important.
So speaking of like the millions of developers, so can you say anything about what the adoption looks like for Flutter? Like how many apps are on Android, iOS, the web? Do you keep track of this stuff, or is it something that is not public information?
There are public numbers because we've quoted them before. I remember because at WASM.io last year, so March of 2023, I quoted 700,000 apps, and this year is closer to 1.2 million.
Yeah, 1 million was a while ago, and this is the Play Store.
Right, just the Play Store. The percentage of new, like, I don't think I can get the exact number, but like the percentage of new apps that are Flutter is hilariously big. Like it's a big number. And of course, I think it's important to bring up, right? Like, there's a long tail. So obviously, for people that are starting out and brand new apps, it's much easier to get started with Flutter, we think, and much easier to go multi-platform. Of course, we're always excited about when big companies choose to use Flutter. Like Universal was a great thing. I think people should go look at the Universal video on our channel. So when big recognized company chooses us, that's great. But in terms of just the number of companies, numbers of apps, it is crazy. And of course, I'm having a blast kind of talking to and keeping track of things on the web. The web is both easier and harder to track because in theory, you can sniff out and see if someone's using the technology much easier. You can go view source. But at the same time, if a app is behind a firewall or behind a login screen, unless someone tells us, or there's some other tool, the Wappalizer, I think, is a tool that's used here to track some web stuff. People can go completely under the radar on the web, which I think is a benefit of the web. Speaking as a web person. But even on that side, the number of web apps, I mean, even just looking at people deploying with WebAssembly in the last few weeks, I've seen a number of apps go production with WebAssembly. So like they keep growing. It's really great. But unfortunately, between lawyers and PR people, like talking about exact numbers and things, we're restricted, except for the Android on the Play Store. But we still keep seeing a huge number of apps, the number of apps increase all the time.
Yeah, it's also hard to know. We just at Cloud Next a month or so ago, a handful of folks walked up to us that work at name brand companies, and I'm not going to say their names because I don't know if they want that conversation to be a thing. But they walked up because they've got a team of 30 developers using Flutter, making this app with millions of users, and it's like stuff that people know about. And we were like, "You guys use Flutter? Great!" And like they'd never talk to us because they didn't need to. So we'll never know how many of those projects are out there.
Yeah, I guess it's pretty hard to track. So we got the comment here. I think it's just encouragement. Thank you so much for keeping Flutter alive. I come from Scala doing FP, and I'm enjoying finding ways to do FP with Flutter and Dart. Never give up on the Flutter, please. From Red Okami. So
yes, sir.
That's the goal.
Our jobs on it right now. Like, yeah, I especially after going to IO, just realize. I mean, going to IO was such a great experience because one, especially as a product manager, right? Like I do some engineering. People see me a little bit on the internet with a few things, but generally I help coordinate and kind of work with our engineers. And so being able to be the face of our engineering work has been so amazing. And just being able to tell the story about the macro work, and of Bob and Jake work on the stuff are there in Seattle, and so I talk to them about that work all the time, and the web work. So being able to be the face of the work we do is amazing. And then just to see the community, like we had such an amazing set of folks that were screaming and yelling, and like it's like having groupies at IO. So yeah, I count myself very lucky to be able to work on this project.
I can imagine it's. I feel like from the work I've been doing throughout the years, that's what I appreciate the most is when you see people use your stuff, and just that feeling, people being happy about what you're doing. It's pretty awesome.
Because we all have situations where like, okay, this technology is fine. I'll get through my day using whatever random tool it is. But to actually build something and work on something and have people find joy in it is just amazing. And then to see Craig and Khan and others do silly videos on YouTube and like, you know, like, you're like, I get paid for this. It's amazing. Yeah, it's great. Thank you so much. We appreciate the community support.
So here's a question from Ivana. What is a common misconception about Flutter and that you often encounter?
What do you think, Craig?
Yeah, I sadly have a lot to say here. Some recent research, we've been comparing both satisfaction numbers, although satisfaction is an odd term even to use when you're talking about someone who's not used Flutter, but I guess it's just, do they have a positive or a negative opinion of Flutter? So developer satisfaction for folks who use Flutter versus positive opinion for developers who do not use Flutter. And not terribly surprisingly, folks who do not use Flutter have a dramatically reduced average opinion of Flutter. So just encountering Flutter hugely increases your opinion of Flutter. So that tells us a good thing. And it also suggests a bunch of misconceptions, which we have found. And a lot of it is, it's just developers that have obviously like not looked at the documentation at all, which is fine. I've not looked at the documentation at most technologies in the world. But then if you talk to them about Flutter, they'll, I don't know, but I wouldn't want to use it that much. Like, I mean, like my app uses GPS. Like, can you even do GPS in Flutter? Like, I don't know. And it's like, yeah, you can. You definitely can. So I think maybe to put a fine point on it, just the extent to which Flutter can do all of the native things. If it's a native platform thing, you can do it in Flutter. And that is, I think, an underappreciated and under-communicated maybe message.
And I think the big one for me is still this notion, obviously we're compared to other things like React Native and other things, and just the way our execution works, right? So like the fact that like, oh no, we're compiled down to native code on all the platforms we run on. Actually, there was I should go find it. Like it's like a thing called Compiler Playground or something. Have you seen this, Craig? I should like send it around. Maybe I'll tweet it later today. We actually write a Dart program and then pick your target architecture and the version of Dart and hit compile. And you can actually go and like step through the x86 or the ARM. I don't know if RISC is wired up. I know this x86 is wired up, and actually look at the assembly code that's generated for the native platform. And so I think people think that we have some, we do have a runtime, right, that handles the garbage collection and other things. But we do compile down the native code. Like one of my favorite demos forever was, doing ahead of time compiled Docker image and compiling a server image down to 10 megs and change 10 or 15 megabytes from our, many 100 megabyte SDK. And so, yeah, the fact that we run natively, I think, surprises still many people. So it's always good to remind people about that.
Yeah, I think that's pretty cool that you can actually both run it as native and compile to bytecode or kernel code, I guess.
Kernel, yeah.
In Dart language, and just run it like on the terminal. I think that's so cool that you sort of support all the different run modes. Super useful.
And it's great because, the fact that we have a VM makes the dev time so much better. Like your startup time is really fast. You don't have to wait for compilation. Debugging is really great. You can get into dev tools and do all those cool things. And also having like compiled down to super efficient machine code. Like we do both.
So
it's insane. I would never recommend anyone build an ecosystem that does that. Like the work involved was insane, but it's cool that we do it.
So I have a little bit of a related question here. And I should say, I have a comment before you get to answer this one. Are there plans to add more platforms like Android Automotive or tvOS or Apple TV? And I should say there are actually a bunch of talks at this conference that covers this. So we have a talk getting Flutter running on Flutter Pi. We have one getting it running on Apple Watch and on Apple TV. Maybe some on platform too. But so that's pretty cool. So you can learn it here, but are you planning any sort of official support for more platforms like this?
I don't believe so. Kev, you're PM, so if it was a thing you would know, but I don't think so, right?
I'm the web PM. I frankly, I don't know. Like in terms of official support for things, I'm on the web, so like WASM was the big thing that I've been working on for a long time. So I guess stay tuned, and of course this is the beautiful thing too about you talk about Google's ownership and making all the calls. Um, uh, I think like it's weird. It's called WebOS, but it's the thing for LG TVs.
Mm-hmm.
Like we talked to the LG folks about getting Flutter running on their televisions, but they drove most of the engineering. And so like Google is not we put effort into it. Like we have this amazing engineer who did the RISC-V support and just the work. It was one person doing RISC-V, just blew me away. But like, so we'll do a lot of the heavy lifting in these places, but we don't control where it goes, where it ends up. So I think like the WebOS stuff on LG TVs was mostly done by the LG folks. So we don't control the platforms it goes to, which is exciting because then you wake up one morning, you're like, we run where? It's super cool.
That is pretty neat. So here's a question, also related to sort of native versus Flutter, I guess. There's a rumor that apps built using Flutter and other hybrid frameworks face disadvantage in the Apple App Store in terms of Apple Store optimization. Can you confirm or deny?
Haven't heard that rumor before, so can genuinely neither confirm nor deny.
Yeah, same here. I mean, I think an important thing to keep in mind is, so obviously we do our own rendering. Like we don't use the native toolkits of the platforms when you run full Flutter, which is benefits for consistency, right? And again, as the web person, it's always cool to say like, we render the exact same pixels in the same engine, right, everywhere. But I also point to like, there's so many, it usually comes down to games, right? But there's so many game engines that do the exact same thing. Like they go to the OS and like, give us a hardware accelerated canvas, whatever you want to call it, and we're going to render pixels here, right? So like games are such a huge part of these ecosystems, and there's so many games that are out there now. So just like, and so we use the same rendering techniques. And again, I cannot confirm nor deny this exact thing. Like Apple checks and you get that affects scoring or something. I honestly have no knowledge of that either way. But the only thing I do know is there's lots of apps in both app stores that aren't using like the out of the box UI toolkit.
Right. So I'm not exactly sure how true this is, but what I've heard, it's easy to get featured on App Store if you incorporate like their new features in your app, which I assume you can do with Flutter since you can use the native APIs.
Yep.
And doing that honestly
easier. Yeah.
And doing that makes sense for Apple, right? If they want to highlight apps that use their newest stuff, like that makes sense to me.
So this may be a question for Craig from CodeBits. What is a good backend solution for intermediate Flutter developer? Flutter is the only stack I'm comfortable with. I'm considering a backend solution to build more complex applications. Well, I know what I would answer, but
yeah, wow, you came to the right conference, CodeBits. Full stack Flutter. So on Observable Flutter, my Thursday weekly live stream, I have been using ServerPod, the creation of our dear friend Victor in the upper left of this very screen, and his company, the three folks we saw in the intro, and maybe others. And I think ServerPod is very high quality. Victor would, I think, be the first to say that they've got a long roadmap. So not every feature that you or I will want is already there, but it's definitely got enough to be a perfectly viable product. I don't think it's minimum anymore. And I would start with ServerPod.
Yeah.
And if you want to see it, check out some of those live streams and see me using it. But it's actually even already evolved since some of those last streams.
So we actually have a bunch of different backend talks in Dart in the conference. So it's not just ServerPod, but Celeste. There is gRPC 2 talks. There is let's see, Dart Frog 2. So there's a talk by VGV that created Dart Frog. So we actually brought in to this conference all the authors of the different backends. So I think that's pretty cool. For most of the talk on this conference, you actually get to hear from the people who created the packages that they're talking about. So that's something we really try to do. All right. I have another question here that I think is probably the most asked questions in the Flutter community. What is the best and easier state management tech to use with Flutter?
I don't know. This is the crazy thing about my perch, at least, is that I spend my time on all these details and customer things and on the website. So I've used Provider and Riverpod because I asked somebody and they're like, use that one. So I did that one. I don't think officially we don't have a recommendation. I think we list a few on the website in terms of ones that we know are relatively well supported. So I don't, I can't tell you what's the best. I think it's a matter of, do a little bit of Googling and see what other people say and ask around. I don't know, Craig, you build more apps than I do, I think. You
Yeah,
use state notifier or whatever it is.
As our dear friend Simon Lightfoot often says in this situation, pause. I think that it is unfortunately a kind of false question. There's a handful that are all very good, but none of them will save you if you put all of your code in the big methods in these classes, whether you have a change notifier, a provider from Riverpod or a block or a whatever else. If you have big, long 100+ line functions that do a ton of really complicated work, in short order, you will feel like your state management solution is coming up short. And if instead you break out lots of those things into repositories and even those repositories have inner layers, because otherwise they would just be super complicated, and you have a nice authorization providing system that just tells you when users come and go, and then your change notifier or your block or your whatever, your provider simply reacting and merely conducting how your app should behave in light of what those lower level systems are doing, then you have a chance of writing some state management code that you will look back on in the future and not hate. So I think the libraries do offer some helpful, it's kind of like bumper bowling. If anyone has bowled here before, those bumpers can help you avoid some pitfalls. So I'm not one who's like, don't even open those libraries. They're just a waste of time. Like I wouldn't say that. But they're all very good. And then the question quickly moves to just code organization. And that, I feel, is where the real kind of meat on the bone is, so to speak.
Right. So a question I have there, how come sort of Google or the Flutter team hasn't built something for Flutter? I feel like, in a sense, that would naturally fit in the whole. It could help the ecosystem if everyone used the same, easier to move from a project to another. Or do you have any opinions there?
I think there's real pros and cons to the world where Google builds a state management solution. And in terms of why Google hasn't, there's some pretty robust state management solutions that apps inside of Google use, right? So Photos, Classroom. I forget to what extent Photos uses Flutter. It might not be much. That might be old news. But like Classroom, Google Earth, right? They have some pretty meaty state management solutions that they use, but they're really tailored to the specific stuff, the other parts of the infrastructure that Google apps need to use. So they're not really appropriate for external use. And then would it be better? I do worry about a world where there's just one solution and everyone is discouraged from innovating, because that one solution will not be perfect. And I think also Google hasn't written one for external consumption because honestly, the engineers who kind of might do it just feel a lot of humility and think, I don't know that I can just show up and decree something so much better than what's already there, like Block and Riverpod, these and the others, these libraries are really good. So this idea that Google would just kind of hand down from on high the one true state management solution and then no one's allowed to innovate anymore. I think there's serious costs to that world, and so that's why we haven't gone in that direction.
The other thing too is I think Google is in a unique position in its ability to, and going back to calling all the shots. Actually, I think the all word is a big thing, right? Because we call a lot of shots in the Flutter world. Like we're investing the team to do an entire WASM compiler, or the team to do all of Impeller. Like these are huge efforts. Maybe there are companies out there doing Flutter work and caring about Flutter that invest that much, but I'm not really aware of them. Like we can do these deep investments, and our resources are limited. Even Google, right? Like, even we discussed that we let some people go, but the headcount remains. But like our headcount isn't increasing dramatically every year. Like Google seems to like the size of the team we're on, and it's a big team. Every time we go to a live conference, I'm like, oh, I haven't met you yet. I keep meeting people that have joined that are on the team. Like this is also the nature of just having a remote team, right? And so things that must be done, I think for us to focus on things that only we can do or that we're funded to do, like work like Impeller, work like the WASM work, the RISC-V compiler, supporting these different platforms, like these kind of deep macros is another great example, right? Like I know there are people that are doing some language work, but like just the deep work on so those are things that I'm not say Google must do, but that we're best positioned to do that kind of deep work. And as we've displayed or shown, things like state management can be done by the community, and we've done the work to make sure that the right hooks are in place for them to be done. And so I think that's good. Like everyone has both a long list of things they wish Google would do on top of what we're already doing, and also has a long list of issues that they want us to fix for our existing stuff. And it really comes down to we have to choose. And so choosing to make sure we're doing a really good job on keeping the bits that we've already committed to do, the core widgets, the compilers, the networking stack, all that stuff, keep doing that really, really well. And that means we have to be mindful about taking on more work.
Right. So I have a question here from someone that I'm also curious about. Any suggestion for Google's Fuchsia operating system, how Flutter is usable for this OS? Is that something you can talk about? Or is that something that's going on?
Yeah, I was on the Fuchsia team for my first year at Google, and that means I'm pretty far out of the loop now, but I think I generally still have the right high-level summary. Fuchsia was a Google invention basically to alleviate the pain of constantly re-rolling custom Linux distributions for little random devices that people are making. The Internet of Things, these devices all tend to run on some kind of customized Frankenstein version of Linux that the producers slap together for that device. And then they fall out of maintenance and they don't, there's no OTA story for updates, and they sit out there and are security vulnerabilities, and it's kind of a quagmire. So Fuchsia was and is supposed to be an operating system that streamlines that whole flow, and it is still aiming for that. I think the project has lost a little bit of velocity, but it was also originally quite tightly bound to Flutter because Flutter is the first UI toolkit that is supported by Fuchsia. It is not the only one, and I think that kind of first early relationship really cemented this idea that Flutter and Fuchsia were going to take over the world together. And Fuchsia has kind of found its niche of these Internet of Things devices, and maybe one day it could even run on the server. It's got a very good security story as well. So anywhere where security vulnerabilities are a constant pain, Fuchsia is a thing to look at. And so anyway, there was this idea that Flutter and Fuchsia were going to take over the world together. But at this point, really, Flutter is just a way to make UIs in Fuchsia, and Fuchsia's targeting the devices it's targeting. And, I wouldn't recommend anyone here hold their breath or lose sleep over it. I think it's kind of more targeted to like businesses and like app developers like us.
Right.
Yeah, if you have
So
an open source hardware project where the Android kind of open source stack is not available, or you have these very like strict requirements and things, like that's a great place to go. Yeah. But I just pulled up the Fuchsia open source project. Like the last commit was 8 minutes ago, so they're still cranking.
yeah,
Oh, for sure.
something's happening then.
Yeah.
Well, that's
Yeah,
cool.
still a big team. Probably it's a big team. I'll just say that. I don't know how big it is anymore, so I won't guess, but it's a big team still.
Yeah. All right. I think we'll have to wrap this up. Do you have any last thoughts or words you want to share with the community or leave?
Craig, I love your thinking face.
I wear that
my
on
big thing is thank you. So there are people who actually the most important thing I think is for people who are just starting out, because I see this a lot. And I think a lot of people, Flutter is the first, maybe in some cases the first UI toolkit you've used or gotten serious about, people teaching. I'd say like stay patient and be friendly. We have such an amazingly friendly community. Victor, I add you to that list, like, interactions on social media. Be open and friendly, and stay engaged and be patient. Because I've seen so many people grow their entire careers with Flutter and Dart, which is super exciting to see. It's tricky when you start out, especially not knowing things. And so like spending time on Stack Overflow or your favorite large language model, asking questions or Googling or posting questions on Discord. We do have a really great open community, and um, make friends if you join your local dev communities or organizations, meet people face to face. It's really, it's so life-giving, energy-giving when we have chances to meet our customers. And it's great for us, and it's really exciting to see what we built together.
Yeah. Yeah, we got so much help from the meetups around the world to set this up. So I want to send a big thank you to all of those that helped us promote the conference and talk with the members and giving talks at the conference. So that's really awesome.
Yeah, well, I think I would echo what Kev said. And, I personally, a big hook that got me into Flutter was the warmth of the community. Honestly, the fact that Google has Cupertino widgets, and there's just this inclusion to Flutter, this intrinsic inclusivity to Flutter. We want to run everywhere. No one is excluded. You developer come in, you target platform, we will run on you. This user experience that user set is used to will support it. And that posture from Google, but also just the community and the personalities really hooked me just as much as the technology. So I would encourage everyone to remember that whenever you're at a conference and in being visible, or you're talking about technology and Flutter online, you could be someone's first interaction with the Flutter community, and you have the power for that to either be a positive or not so positive experience for them. And I think we all know which of those roads we want to choose. So that's a reminder that I would give to everyone. And let's keep the Flutter community what it's always been.
Thank you. And thank you so much for joining us today. And we got a lot of questions from the community today that we never had time to get to. But I hope we get more chances in the future. So I just want to say a big thank you to both of you, and I may see you in Germany and maybe many other in the community
Hopefully soon.
as well.
Enjoy the conference, everybody.
Yeah, sounds great. Thanks for having us.
Thank you very much.